Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens, Shea Weber's headed to the Hall of Fame, and the Panthers win the Stanley Cup.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1097 of Locked On Canadiens, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week, wherever you get your daily podcast, Google, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube.com. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Some terms do apply. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Matla. You've been very familiar with me for the last week and a half, and if you're not sick of me yet, well, we may have news on that in the relative near future, but that's for another show. I am once again joined by my fantastic co-host, the active stick, Laura Saba, who is back from a well-deserved vacation to Redacted.
I could say where it is now that I'm back.
Because you're not there anymore, so it doesn't matter. Laura got to live my dream and go to Scotland for a week and a half.
I'm also going to go back one day. If we have any listeners in Scotland, please hit us up. I do want to know more. I felt absolutely insanely in love with your country while I was there. It has always been a bucket list item of mine, to go to Scotland. And I was there obviously for the heartbreak of the Euros, which I'm so sorry about, but it just I love your country so much. I want to come back in a couple of years. Please hit us up. And also Scott also wants to go to Scotland. So
yes,
hit us up so you can give us both recommendations. I absolutely adore it. And I highly recommend everyone go. Just remember that it is the UK, so it's going to cost you 3 times as much as you think it would.
For people from Toronto, they're used to that at this point. So we've got a lot to cover because originally I was going to lead the show with, hey, the big news is the Panthers won the Stanley Cup. And then 9 zillion things happened from the middle of that game until the time that I got home from work today. And we are a Habs-centric podcast, so we have to lead with the biggest Habs news of the day. And that is that former captain and current Utah Hockey Club member Shea Weber is headed to the Hockey Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2024. And if you're wondering why is he going into the Hockey Hall of Fame when he has 2 years left on his contract, I say it's because the NHL is making it up as it goes, but he hasn't 100%. Played a game in 3 years, which is their
loophole. They're cheating.
It's why Yager hasn't gone in, because he refuses to stop playing hockey games at this point. But Shea Weber goes in, 1,038 career NHL games, 224 goals, 365 assists, played 275 games over 5 seasons with the Habs with 58 goals, 88 assists. And he was obviously the captain of this team when the Canadiens went on that run to the Stanley Cup final. I am surprised he was a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer. I thought he would eventually get in with, thanks to, his Olympic medals and everything, but there's not a lot of other hardware in that case. And all this really has done for me, Laura, is reinforce the fact that Carey Price will be eligible to go into the Hall of Fame, I believe, next season, because have been 3 years since he last played a game.
He better be unanimous first ballot.
If I'm looking at some of the other people who've gotten in, Henrik Lundqvist got in and has maybe a little bit more personal hardware, but Carey Price has a bunch of other awards, has the Olympic gold and everything to go with that. He's won at every level except the Stanley Cup. I think that he's going to be a near unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer. This just reinforced that fact. It is very weird that Shea Weber is still being paid for 2 more years as the Chris Pronger situation all over again, but with the same team, no less.
Right.
He was an Arizona Coyote up until about a month ago, and he's currently the only defenseman signed for next year by Utah, which is very, very funny to think about out loud.
It is really funny, but let's examine Shea Weber as a candidate. So at first glance, he does not have the same kind of background as a lot of the people who do get in, right? There's multiple cups there, there's Conn Smythes there, there's other hardware. But for me, Shea Weber is something that defined, let's say, the Nashville Predators for quite some time while he was there. He was one of their first superstars. And there was a point, you can remember the offer sheet to Shea Weber. There was a point where he was the most coveted defenseman in the NHL, right? So there was a point. So like I think like the fact that he's one of the pillars of a franchise is part of it. And when he was in his prime, he was phenomenal. You couldn't think of a team. Like if you were picking a team, you couldn't leave him off, right? That was it. Whether it was All-Star, whether it was Olympics, whether it was, inviting him to the World Championships, whether or not he chose to go, Shea Weber was the guy for such a long time. And for all intents and purposes, like as many issues as people have with this idea of the pick, like he went through his career for the most part just being known for hockey. He wasn't known for any serious controversies or things like that. Like this is the kind of guy that hockey people look at and they go, we want him, right? Like he is a hockey man's player. And so it makes sense to me that he would be in the conversation this early. It makes sense to me that he would be unanimous. It's just like for me, I just think that as time goes on and as we get out of that era of like real true greatness, like our criteria for the Hockey Hall of Fame has over time gotten looser and looser and looser. And that's something where it is inevitable with such a diluted pool with like so many players and so much parity. It is inevitable. It's kind of just an illustration of how these decisions change over time. And I have tried, especially in the last couple of years, to try to look at the people who do get nominated and who do get inducted and who do get chosen in the absence of who I wanted or who was robbed or et cetera, because that for me, like I have to separate the two, because otherwise what's happening is my disappointment in one is tarnishing my joy for the other. Scott, you have thoughts.
I'm glad that you mentioned the people who did get picked and the people who didn't get picked for this Hall of Fame class, because it's kind of a wolf situation here. There were two women elected to the Hall of Fame, Natalie Darwitz, who was just recently let go by the Minnesota PWHL team and a whole lot of things, and Christy Wendell-Pohl were both nominated and elected to the Hall of Fame this year. Pavel Datsyuk makes perfect sense going in, one of the best two-way defensive forwards and all superstar forwards you've ever seen. And then from there, it gets a little bit dicier. I understand the logic behind David Poile getting in. There are two names on this list that I really take umbrage with over anything else, and that's Jeremy Roenick and Colin Campbell getting into this. Well, Alexander McGinley was once again left off the Hall of Fame. I don't get it anymore. I don't understand how Alexander McGinley is not in the Hall of Fame. He's done literally everything that Jeremy Roenick hasn't. Stanley Cup, all these other things, all individual awards, more points, everything, and he's just not in, and I don't get it. Scott Wheeler had a very good tweet that I want to look up here, but while I am doing that, I want to point out that I don't understand why Colin Campbell is going in. If you will remember, Colin Campbell was famous for saying Mark Savard should have kept his head up and deserved what happened to him when his career was ended with a concussion, and then basically sent not a blackmail, but some kind of email to prevent players on his son, Gregory Campbell's team, during the 2011 playoffs from suffering punishment. And this is who the NHL has thought just to put in their builders category. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me that they thought this was a good idea. And I have the tweet in front of me from Scott Wheeler. They do a ghost committee at The Athletic, has given him a new appreciation for this process. But Jeremy Roenick has never won the Stanley Cup, never won an NHL award, was never a first or second All-Star team pick, and finished top 6 in the league in scoring in his best season. Not first, not second, not their top 6. That is who they elected to the Hall of Fame over Alexander McGinley this year. And I truly don't understand why they are not doing this. Alexander McGinley has, as soon as I can get elite prospects to load up, because it's almost insulting that he hasn't been put in at this point. He has an Olympic gold medal. He has a world championship. He has a world junior medal. He's a triple gold club member. He has a world junior silver medal. He has a Lady Byng trophy. He has a Rocket Richard trophy. He has 2 All-Star nominations. He has a Stanley Cup thing. And then he was named to several IIHF All-Star teams. What are we doing here? it blows my mind that he's not in the Hall. And then he has also in his career over 1,000 points. He had a couple of seasons where he hit, 20, 30, 40 goals, and he's not in. It's when you look at who got in today and who did not, it's almost insulting to some of these other players. And that's kind of upsetting to me a little bit. Laura, do you have any?
That's why it is upsetting. So I think I am upset, and then I have to separate that because I also want to be happy for Shea Weber, right? So that's to me is the biggest thing, is that there's always going to be this, and we have to kind of separate it. And I agree so much with you on Colin Campbell as well as Jeremy Roenick. But I think we have run out of time in this segment, and we will have the same debate over and over again every year until the people who are deserving do finally get elected.
Yes, and we have so much more to get into, including a Stanley Cup champion, first-time Stanley Cup champion, and that's coming up next. But passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die vehicle alive, and eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber. You're not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to United States customers. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and this is what was going to lead the show originally, because why wouldn't it? This is the reason that we didn't do a Monday show, is because I wanted to see who was going to win this game before I recorded anything at all. And then other chaos broke out because the NHL refuses to let either of us rest even a little bit. But as of last night at about, let's say, 10:30 or 11 o'clock-ish, the Florida Panthers are your 2024 Stanley Cup champions for the first time in their history. I believe that's now 31 years since they entered the league. Everyone remembers the original rat phase. This was a game that it was close, and then the Oilers, you could just see the gas tank just spill out onto the ice, and there was nothing left in that. The Panthers got a 2-1 goal. Bobrovsky was incredible. They held that lead, and then we'll get into some of the baffling things that happened at the end of this game. But first, Laura, you and I both predicted the Florida Panthers to beat the Edmonton Oilers when this all started. We said 6 games, and people said we were disrespecting the Oilers. Maybe we did a little bit, given their down 3-0 coming back to tie the series. But also, I'd like to say that we were right, which is the most important part of all of this, is that we were right. Even rooting for a divisional rival who I have yelled at about a lot of things in my time on this podcast. But the Florida Panthers, for the first time in history, are Stanley Cup champions. There's so many players on that team and people in management that I am very excited for and happy for in that I don't feel the same way about the Oilers for a lot of different reasons. But it was a fun series. I was having fun the whole time. If the Oilers lost in 4 games, I was having a great time regardless. But fun series, very nervy final game. You can tell that this was a last stand kind of thing, obviously. And the Panthers didn't let it get to overtime. They're not going to give McDavid that chance. And boy, oh boy, being in a division now that has 3 of the last 5 Stanley Cup champions in it, plus the Bruins having an appearance in there recently, the Canadiens technically having an appearance in there recently. The Atlantic Division is, I think, the place to be if you want to really test your mettle so far.
You know who doesn't have a recent Stanley Cup final appearance is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I thought you were going to say the Ottawa Senators or the Buffalo Sabres.
It's been longer for the Leafs, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been a long time. I was going to say Buffalo hasn't been there since 99, and Ottawa was there in 06 when Chris Phillips famously threw the puck into his net and gave Travis Moen a Stanley Cup winning goal against Anaheim. But I'm just gonna give myself a pat on the back. You can give yourself a pat on the back. We were right in that series, and I guess my question is, I think we learned a lot about how you can how structuring a roster and finding a coach that fits can really get you a long way in these playoffs, and having a goalie that just turns into God when the time comes upon him.
Right. And I will be honest, like, I did not have a lot of faith in the Panthers coach. And, I did want to point out also that this was an exciting series because it had a lot of storylines in it. And like one of the potential reverse sweep too was a big thing, like the Edmonton Oilers finally getting one. But my question now for the Oilers is, where do you go from here, right? Like, you've been criticized so much for not having enough goaltending and defense. You finally make it to a Stanley Cup final and you come up short. What do you do? Do you learn the lessons from that? But with respect to the Florida Panthers, I think, a lot of our listeners who constantly talk about size and grit, etc., will be happy because they were a gritty, tough team. They are a hard, difficult team. But who won them that series and who actually got them this far is the talent on that team. And you cannot forget that. Like, and the Panthers, as much as they are a division rival who gives us fits and we don't like them personally, the story is good. I really like that it was thought out. It was well done. It was, there was a method to all of their madness, and they learned lessons from the mistakes that they made in their past, which is fantastic. Like, that to me is huge. And I also do want to point out that they used to be known for plastic rats, but now they're known for a human rat, which I think is so poetic. And I am really happy that Tkachuk won a Stanley Cup. And I honestly, I think they showed that you need all of the elements. You can't just win with size. You can't just win with skill. You can't just win with goaltending. You have to have all of it come together. You have to be a tough team to play against, but on the end of that, you also have to have that talent to drive your offense. And you need both. You can't win with just one. And you do need all of those elements, and you do need to have a plan. You need to have a vision. You need to have a plan. You need to execute. And if things don't work, you need to make changes right away. Like, there were a lot of trades that the Panthers made that didn't work out. There were a lot of decisions that they made that didn't work out, right? Like, they were overly reliant on one thing and they let this other player go, and but the changes that they made finally came together because everyone bought in. And that's what we want for the Canadiens to build. I think the Canadiens are not going to be exactly like the Panthers. They're just a different team philosophically. But I have faith that this organization will be able to understand and recognize you need all of the elements to really complement each other and work together. You can't have anything missing. It cannot be like a Toronto Maple Leaf situation, or even, sad to say, another Oilers situation, because the Oilers still have glaring issues, right? They got to the final, like who won the Conn Smythe? Connor McDavid, because he was the one that drove them through this entire playoffs. Like, he literally carried this team on his back, sorry. And it's because they had so many flaws. So you have to be able to either eliminate the flaws or compensate for them if you are going to win. You can't be a perfect team. There are very few teams that will have the opportunity to have everything going on all cylinders at all times, particularly in the playoffs. You're going to run into problems. You're going to have to be able to complement your weaknesses. And I think that is really the difference for the Oilers, is that they weren't able to cover up, mask, and complement adequately when it really mattered.
The biggest thing about the Panthers, the people are like, oh, they're big and they're nasty, but they're big in a way that is not 2011 Bruins. They are a team that moves the puck extremely well. They're nasty and they're physical, but it comes with a level of skill to that is important. They can play a heavy, skillful game. Their back end is tall. They are, and the Canadiens can look at that. If you can find guys that can move the puck, look at Arbor Jacki. He's a big dude who can move the puck out. You can work people into that system. You asked where the Oilers go from here. Draisaitl's a UFA at the end of next season. McDavid's a UFA in 2 years. The rumblings have already started that it's like, are you splitting things? They have $10 million in cap space, and they have 7 forwards, 5 defensemen, and 2 goalies signed for next year. They have a roster of 14 players out of 23, and yeah, they'll promote a few people up. That is not a team that's going to go deep again. Dylan Holloway is going to need a contract, but Connor Brown is gone. Sam Carrick is gone. Warren Fogle, who was very good for them in the playoffs, gone. Sam Gagner, gone. Adam Henrique, gone. Matthias Janmark, also very good for them, gone. Corey Perry, gone. On defense, Philip Broberg, RFA, Vincent Desharnais, UFA, Troy Stetcher, UFA, Kelvin Pickard, their backup goalie, UFA. This is a team that has to change things. They are not in a position like Toronto where they can run it back and make this work. Like, I look at the end of that game, and I know this segment's going to run a little long, so you're all going to have to deal with that, is they were out of gas. Their depth players showing up is what got them to Game 7. Yes, McDavid was very good, but guys like Fogle, guys like Connor Brown, guys like Dylan Holloway and Matthias Janmark helped get them there. Matthias Janmark scored their only damn goal of the game, and then they just went big five. McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, and then whether it was Ekholm or Nurse, and then another forward out there. And then they waited forever to pull Stuart Skinner, and it just didn't work. And by the time they got to the last shift, McDavid's done. He's playing through injuries that are going to require surgery. Draisaitl's hurt. They don't have the gas. You have no fresh legs in Florida's depth, because even with them rolling it, all of their legs are fresher. And that just came down to Paul Maurice outcoached the Oilers at the end there.
And that's the thing, like, Paul Maurice outcoaching somebody was, like, honestly, for me, that was the biggest surprise throughout. Like last season when they made it to the finals, and this season. It's
a wild thing. Obviously, I'll refer you to Locked On Panthers and Locked On Oilers for their takes on this that are from a less than neutral perspective. We have one segment left to go here because the Atlantic Division in the last 24 hours has just decided to go a little bit crazy. We're going to get into all of that coming up next. But first, as I said off the top of the show, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. And it's summer. Hockey's over. Basketball's over. Football's still months away. But it is baseball season. And if you're like me and you love going to the ballpark to catch a game at any time, maybe spur of the moment, you're going to want to check out Game Time because they are the authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And prices on the Game Time app go down closer to first pitch, unlike other places. So you can find flash deals. You can get last minute deals up to 60% off for things, baseball games, concerts, shows, anything at all on Game Time. And the best part is when you are looking at that view from your seat and you decide these are the tickets you're buying, you can check it out and see the price that you are paying when you go to cash out. No hidden fees, nothing else at all. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Some terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Whew, boy. All right. We're in the home stretch here because every NHL team, I shouldn't say every NHL team, the Atlantic Division in the last 24 hours has been like, hey, the Panthers are about to do something cool. We're going to get in there and make it about us. And I guess we'll start with what happened just before Game 7 puck drop yesterday. The Bruins and Senators worked out a trade for goaltender Linus Ullmark. So Linus Ullmark is now headed to Ottawa. He has 1 year left at $5 million. Heading in the opposite direction, goaltender Eunice Korpisalo for Mark Kastelik and the Senators' first-round pick this year, which is 25th overall, which the Canadiens are picking 26th overall. And if you want a real war flashback here, the last time that happened, the Bruins picked David Pastrnak at 25th overall, one pick before the Montreal Canadiens. So that's deeply saddening.
That when the Canadiens picked McCarron?
That was when the Canadiens picked Nikita Sherbak. McCarron was 2 years before that. So I like the Sherbak pick. It's just that David Pastrnak became an international superstar and Sherbak kind of became
no longer a Montreal Canadian.
Yeah, he became part of the fodder of the Michel Therrien, Claude Julien, Sylvain Lefebvre, Marc Bergevin era for the good and the bad there. This trade, I hate it because the Senators seemingly got a competent goalie. I don't know if it's actually going to help them or not because I don't know if it's their goaltending or if it's their defense. That's the problem there.
I think it's the fact that they're the Ottawa Senators, to be honest. I just don't understand why the Boston Bruins would help a division rival in that way, which is not to say They obviously had to figure out what they were doing with their two goalies, right? They're two talented, promising, extremely competent, goalies that both could have been of the future, right? Like, it was great fun watching them in tandem, but when the time comes to pay one of them, you need to get value for the other. So I'm not against them getting value for their goaltender. I'm also I'm intrigued by this because obviously they've got a player who can be a backup goaltender, let's say. And then you've got a pick. Like, I don't know much about the player, but I do know that like a first round pick is a first round pick. So I don't fault them for trying to get value. I just fault them for assisting a division rival. Of all things, a division rival. That's my only issue with it.
And I think with this, that I believe I was talking to some of the Bruins fans in the former SB Nation Slack, is that they haven't had a first round pick in a couple of years, which they were in need of to replenish their pool there. Eunice Korpisalo is signed for the next 4 years at $3 million, and Jeremy Swayman is RFA this offseason. So Swayman's getting paid. He's the guy who got them through the Toronto series and onwards. And they got to make the most of it because they have a lot of guys coming up for contracts. Brad Marchand's due a contract after this season. Charlie Coyle's up. A lot of guys are coming up in 25, 26, so they're trying to create the cap space. For the Senators, I get why they did this, and they're clearly cutting bait on a guy they thought was going to be the guy. They have $11 million in cap space. They only have 7 forwards signed. They have 6 defensemen, 2 goalies. Obviously, Josh Norris is on injured reserve still, but they've got to re-sign guys like Shane Pinto this offseason. What are you going to pay him? We're going to see whether or not this was the Bruins made Ullmark good or Ullmark is good kind of move. They weren't the only teams creating some chaos here. The Detroit Red Wings made 2 trades that seemed a little bit weird to me. They traded their 2023 second round pick or prospect Andrew Gibson to the Nashville Predators for a second round pick and Jesse Kiskinen, and then promptly traded that second round pick and defenseman Jake Wallman, a guy that analytics people really loved, to the Sharks for future considerations. I don't get it. I love this.
That was weird. Like, that I love was this for JD. The real thing. Sorry, you were saying?
I was like, I love this for JD. I don't get this on a Red Wings side unless they are clearing and now into the next page of cap friendly. They have $32 million in cap space now when they cleared that 3
points. To make that though.
Well, they have 2 big contracts due up this offseason. Lucas Raymond's an RFA and Moritz Seider's an RFA, and they're both going to get pretty hefty deals.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going to spend on an actual starting goaltender besides Ville Husso and get someone in there who can. But the thought is they're going to try and make a splash here because they have some UFAs to re-sign. They have some RFAs to re-sign here. They've got a lot of guys on entry-level deals outside the NHL that they may be counting on, guys like Axel Sandin Pellikka, Simon Edvinsson, William Wallander, and see maybe what are these guys going to do. But I don't get the Wallman trade when now your highest paid and longest term defenseman is Ben Sherratt and your second longest term defenseman is Justin Hall.
Oh, it's Justin Hall.
Seider's up for a contract, so he's not even signed yet.
So I know in our Locked On group chat, the Red Wings guys were pretty puzzled. So please check out Locked On Red Wings tomorrow to see if they figured out why they did this. But Scott, I think you made a great point with them needing to make a big splash because they did come within a whisper of making the playoffs at a time where their rebuild is supposed to be turning into contention. So it's been a couple of years where last year they were exciting and they didn't make it. And then this past season they were exciting and they almost made it. They really need something. Like we talked so much earlier this offseason about should the Canadiens make a splash? Do they need to? And we said no. But do the Detroit Red Wings need to make a splash? Yes, absolutely. They need to take a step forward. Whether it was, whether they need to add a big name free agent or they need to make a big trade or whatever, they do need to take a step forward this season. Otherwise, they're going to be at risk of staying in that treading water position for years and years and years. So I understand them making moves. I just don't understand this particular one unless they have, something up their sleeve. And I do appreciate, though, and this might be, Stevie or whatever it is, I do appreciate that it wasn't an instant reaction to not making the playoffs. Like, this was a watching everyone else in the playoffs, watching all of that stuff, waiting until the market started to move, waiting until it was okay. Like, it was, okay to start making trades and like making things about themselves, as you put it. And then they kind of decided to do things. And just for me, I'm just a bit confused as to what the end game is here, but I'm sure there is one. I don't think this is something that's been done without a plan in mind.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where this goes. And obviously Steven Stamkos is the big, name that's out there. I'm wondering if they're chasing in UFA, if they're going to bring back Patrick Kane on a little bit bigger contract. We'll leave that up to Locked On Red Wings to guide you guys through there. Obviously,
they're awesome guys, though. Definitely check their podcast out. We love them.
Yes, we will. Well, Laura will be back tomorrow. We have some draft stuff from our friends at Locked On NHL Prospects. We're going to be keeping up with the news. I will be at a wrestling show. So if you're in Buffalo and at AEW, just wave and, yell about Mark Scheifele being a coward or something like that, because we love you and appreciate you. You can follow us on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com for any of your questions. You can follow Laura at The Active Stick. You can follow myself at Scott Matla. You can find us wherever you get your daily podcast and here on YouTube.com. The draft is closing in. We can't wait to share it with you. Live show Saturday after the draft is over and we've had a chance to process a little bit. Come hang out and talk about it with us. Folks, that's going to do it for us, but we will see you all next time.